Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Science of the Big Bang Theory, what America's favorite sitcom can teach you about physics, flags, and the idiosyncrasies of scientists. By Mark Brake. Narrated by Brian Holden. Space. Welcome to The Science of the Big Bang Theory, the ultimate dissection of television's favorite sitcom. With over 200 episodes and a dozen seasons, The Big Bang Theory is a hallmark American television series, and one that not only and unusually places science center stage, but also brings a new class of character to mainstream television, the science nerd. The show is undeniably popular and influential in shaping public attitudes to science and scientists. And yet, there are few books that explore the show's culture and social dimension, and the science that sits behind the script. This book does just that. It's at times a lighthearted and other times a hard-hitting science companion to The Big Bang Theory. It looks behind the comedy scenes and scripts of the show to provide you with the kind of dissection of the science and culture you'd need to understand math, science, history, unraveling the mysteries that all started with the Big Bang. Hey, as they say in the show's theme song. Like other books in this series, The Science of Superheroes and The Science of Science Fiction, this book is split into 4 sections of space, time, machine, and monster. The topic of space comes up often in episodes of The Big Bang Theory, whether it's references to the final frontier of Star Trek, or the character of Spock, or the vast interstellar depths of the cosmos and the legions of fleet and nimble spaceships of Star Wars. The selection of space topics in this first section of the book shows the huge range of science subjects on display, from the fashion implications of physics in the episode The Middle-earth Paradigm to the expectation of alien invasion in The Earworm Reverberation. Some topics are quintessentially space, such as the imagining of alien life implied in the Bat Jar Conjecture episode, and the direct reference to particle astrophysics in The Grasshopper Experiment. But for other space topics, we have to dig deeper and think a little more playfully about what we mean by space. The issue of teleportation in the Jerusalem duality is a unique form of travel through space. Sheldon's snobbery about geology in The Geology Methodology is questioned by thinking about geographical space on our planet and how important the planetary science of geology has been to discovering the truth about the human journey on this Earth. Finally, we think about historical space. Sheldon's famous Fun with Flags game is featured in, among many other episodes, the Valentino Submergence. Here you could think of the history of many nations on Earth as a story about the pursuit of empire and the conquest of space. To capture foreign territories in the quest for land or geographical space, and to claim that glittering prize as your own. It's a conquest of space in a very real way. Sadly, in the luminous fish effect, Sheldon once more shows his ignorance on the topic of geology. So we explore Sheldon's contention that there's nothing interesting about caves by taking a look at the importance of the subterranean space caves for those who dream of traveling to the remote corners of the solar system and beyond. The Middle-earth Paradigm. Sheldon and Physics Fashions. In The Middle-earth Paradigm, Season 1, Episode 6, Sheldon attempts to wear the Doppler effect in clothing. The frequency of a wave-like signal, such as sound or light, depends on the movement of the sender and of the receiver. This is known as the Doppler effect. Some of its manifestations we know from everyday life, such as a fire engine's siren abruptly changing pitch as the engine passes by. Others are of interest in astronomy and astrophysics. Einstein Online, a web portal on Einstein's theories of relativity. In astronomy, that source can be a star that emits electromagnetic waves. From our vantage point, Doppler shifts occur as the star orbits around its own center of mass and moves toward or away from Earth. These wavelength shifts can be seen in the form of subtle changes in its spectrum, the rainbow of colors emitted in light. When a star moves toward us, its wavelengths get compressed, and its spectrum becomes slightly bluer. When the star moves away from us, its spectrum looks slightly redder. The pattern of a star's Doppler shifts can change over time as a result of gravity affecting the star's motion. Recently, scientists used the Doppler effect to detect color shifts in the light absorbed by an exoplanet, which indicated strong winds in the planet's atmosphere. Explained. The Doppler effect. MIT News. Dressing up all Doppler. In the Middle-earth Paradigm episode, our usual suspects get dressed up for Penny's Halloween party. Leonard is Frodo from Lord of the Rings, Howard is Robin Hood, though everyone thinks he's Peter Pan, and Raj is the Norse god Thor. But it's Sheldon's ambitious costume that stands out most. No one knows what he's meant to be. To be fair, a Doppler effect costume was always going to be a challenge, so it's understandable why Sheldon's take on Doppler in dress code is pretty lame. The stripes of the costume gradually thinning toward the center of Sheldon's chest, that also features a white dot, are meant to portray the contrasting shifts in wavelength and frequency depending on the sender and receiver of the signal. Sheldon tries to help along this visual ambiguity by demonstrating the meow sound of the change in pitch of a fire engine passing by, though the penny still doesn't drop for Penny. In this book's entry on The Joys of Spectroscopy, we explain the Doppler effect, how wave-like signals, such as light and sound, depend on the movement of the sender and receiver. This same effect results in a fire engine's pitch being distinctly higher when approaching than when receding, as well as in the famous redshift read on a galaxy's Fraunhofer lines as they race across space from the Big Bang. These examples present two other costume possibilities for Sheldon. First, some wearable audio tech, which simply plays the meow sound when other party-goers get close, or else some kind of artistic representation of redshift. For example, a red t-shirt boasting the caption, "This shirt is blue if you run fast enough." Yet another Doppler costume option is an exoplanets t-shirt, but this needs a bit of explaining. The use of Doppler shifts in light is one of the main techniques for discovering exoplanets beyond our solar system. Exoplanet discovery is a cutting-edge part of modern physics, so the t-shirt would probably be a talking point. This is how Doppler works for such planets. If a sample star is without exoplanets in orbit about it, then there will be no change in the pattern of its light output over time. However, if a sizable exoplanet is in orbit about the star, then the gravitational pull of this unseen planet will perturb its parent star's motion, affecting a detectable change in the Doppler pattern over time. In short, the pattern of a star's light can be seen to Doppler change due to the exoplanet's gravity. This is not only true for stars in outer space with sufficiently large exoplanets, but also for aliens in deep space looking back at our solar system. Our sun would be seen to Doppler wobble due to the influence of Jupiter. So, what's Sheldon's Doppler exoplanets t-shirt option? A black t-shirt showing a toy telescope and a star pictured at two extremes in its circular orbit. At one extreme, as it moves away from the scope, the wavy light signal it sends back to the telescope is red, and at the other extreme, as it moves toward the scope, the wavy light signal it sends back to the telescope is blue. The t-shirt should be captioned, "Doppler Star Wobbles Discover Exoplanets," or something of that sort. Shit happens. This Sheldon question of representing complex science concepts in clothing reminds me of an episode from a few years back. I was absent-mindedly driving into town when I noticed a bumper sticker on the car in front of mine. "Shit happens," the bumper sticker declared. In my head, I'm sure I could hear George Carlin saying something like, "Damn right it does." But at the time, I was working as a tenured professor of science communication at university. The public communication of science-related topics to non-experts was my job. Science communication had started with professional scientists doing so-called outreach or popularization, but later, science communication evolved into a professional field in its own right. The field now embraces publishing and journalism, science museums and exhibitions, and media production. Anything, in fact, that includes communication between scientists and non-scientists. And as it was perfectly permissible for science communicators to use humor, storytelling, and metaphor to get their point across in an amusing and entertaining fashion, my mind began to fixate on that "shit happens" bumper sticker. In 2 words, shit happens seemed like a perfect encapsulation of chaos theory, that interdisciplinary study of the apparent randomness of chaotic, complex systems. Chaos theory, whose founding guru, Edward Lorenz, had only managed a definition of when the present determines the future, but the approximate present does not approximately determine the future, had been whittled down by non-experts into the far superior definition of shit happens. It was so ingenious. I'd even begun to kid myself that Jeff Goldblum, playing Dr. Ian Malcolm, science fiction's most famous chaos theorist, had actually said shit happens at some point during the original Jurassic Park movie. Checkpoint, Goldblum's character doesn't in fact say this, but he does say in reply to an inquiry as to whether he has any kids, "Me? Oh, hell yeah, 3. I love kids. Anything at all that can and does happen. Same with wives, for that matter. I'm always on the lookout for a future ex-Mrs. Malcolm." I was so taken by shit happens, in fact, that I started to set myself a professional challenge. What other famous science concepts could be neatly encapsulated in a 2-worded summation, with the proviso that one of the words has to be shit? Even before I began to conjure up my science concepts, I began to plan a whole range of lucrative bumper stickers and t-shirts of the kind that fashionable physics nerds like Leonard, Sheldon, and Raj would wear. First up was Darwin's theory of evolution. Shit evolves, perhaps, or even better, shit changes. The associated t-shirt could sport an image of a carnivorous dinosaur in silhouette, eating that outline drawing of a fish with the word Jesus inside it. Or that popular logo, for some, where the fish outline either features the name Darwin inset or has sprouted legs and encapsulates the word evolve. Or that 1871 caricature of Darwin as an ape published in the satirical magazine The Hornet, with the heading, "A Venerable Orang-Outang." The possibilities are plentiful. Next up, the Big Bang Theory in cosmology. The 2-word slogan of choice for this would be "shit expands," of course, and yet the visual representation of the Big Bang itself under the slogan proved a less than trivial exercise. One possibility is a 3-color map of the sky in microwave. This is an all-sky picture of the infant universe created from 9 years of microwave data. The image allegedly reveals the roughly 14-billion-year-old temperature fluctuations, shown as color differences, that correspond to the seeds that grew from the Big Bang into the galaxies that physicists know and love today. A third example would be the geological theory of plate tectonics. That theory, in which the Earth is pictured as a jigsaw puzzle of crustal plates, moving slowly about the globe on molten gloop, could be summarized in the eye-catching, though admittedly less than romantic slogan of "shit floats." The t-shirt illustration for plate tectonics would be a no-brainer and might feature a cartoon planet Earth, complete with its plates jauntily floating about on the gloop. With these thoughts in mind, I caught a plane to Copenhagen, where I was about to coincidentally run a workshop on the question of science communication for a group of European physicists. Many of these guys were nuclear physicists, and I kid you not, the group leader was a Professor Bang. Anyhow, I figured this was my chance to road test my Shit Shirts collection of physics t-shirts to a captive audience who would surely be exactly the kind of prospective customers my business concept was out to capture. The session went well, with a number of other ideas added to the mix. Shit reacts for Newton's third law of motion, a less than convincing shit's relative for Einstein's theory of relativity, and shit's weird for quantum theory. Someone even suggested a t-shirt of "Shit's Decentralized," for science's most revolutionary discovery, the heliocentric cosmology of Copernicus, who first suggested the Earth revolved around the sun and not the other way around. I never did launch my physics shit-shirts business plan. Maybe the business name is something of a problem. Whatever. If there are any bored venture capitalists out there looking for a sure thing, please contact my publisher. The Earworm Reverberation, an Expectation of Extraterrestrials. In The Earworm Reverberation, Season 9, Episode 10, Raj talks of the work of the United Nations Department for Outer Space Affairs. The United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, or UNUSA, is the United Nations office responsible for promoting international cooperation in the peaceful uses of outer space. It also maintains a 24-hour hotline as the United Nations focal point for satellite imagery requests during disasters, and manages the United Nations platform for space-based information for disaster management and emergency response, or UN SPIDER. UNUSA.org, website for the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. No one would have believed in the last years of the 19th century that this world was being watched keenly and closely by intelligences greater than man's and yet as mortal as his own. With infinite complacency, men went to and fro over this globe about their little affairs, serene in their assurance of their empire over matter. At most, terrestrial men fancied there might be other men upon Mars, perhaps inferior to themselves and ready to welcome a missionary enterprise. Yet across the gulf of space, minds that are to our minds as ours are to the beasts that perish, intellects vast and cool and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes, and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. H.G. Wells, The War of the Worlds. Alien Invasion. A host of alien specters have haunted humans for decades, ever since H.G. Wells opened his 1898 novel, The War of the Worlds. The story starts with the most superb opening in the history of science fiction, and with the promise of alien invasion. The Martians in Wells's book are agents of outer space, a space that powerfully shatters our human domain. The War of the Worlds is the greatest and most influential of all alien contact stories, and is a Darwinian fable on a universal scale. One of the main points of The War of the Worlds was that Wells was truly annoyed at the idea of the becoming of man, or the contemporary theory of the origin and evolution of human society. So his book begins with a quote from Johannes Kepler on the topic of life on other planets. "But who shall dwell in these worlds if they be inhabited? Are we, or they, lords of the world? And how are all things made for man?" The book becomes a battle between Earth and Mars, humans and Martians, and to underline Wells's point, the narrator of the story of this struggle for survival is a philosopher, writing a thesis on the progression of moral ideas with civilization. The narrator's assumption of a bright future is rudely blown apart in mid-sentence by the brutal natural force of evolution in the shape of the Martian attack. Wells had been well aware of the possibility of alien life for some time. He had contributed to the extraterrestrial debate in 1888 at the Royal College of Science on the subject, "Are the planets habitable?" He had also written essays in support of fellow authors on the topic of possible alien life, such as Kepler, French writer Camille Flammarion, and American businessman Percival Lowell, whose wrong-headed obsession with evidence of life on Mars had recently reached Europe. Rather than being a whimsical work of fiction, The War of the Worlds demolishes the idea that man is the peak of evolution. Instead, Wells creates the myth of a technologically superior alien intelligence. Mars is a dying world. Its seas are evaporating, its atmosphere melting away. The entire planet is doomed. So, as Wells writes in The War of the Worlds, To carry warfare sunward is, indeed, their only escape from the destruction that generation after generation creeps upon them. So the terror of outer space is brought down to Earth. Wells delivers repeated reminders of the immensity of vacancy in which the dust of the material universe swims, and evokes the unfathomable darkness of space. Life is portrayed as precious and frail in a cosmos that is essentially deserted. The modern ideas of alien invasion and contact, such as those featured in the Big Bang Theory episodes The Earworm Reverberation and The Large Hadron Collision, owe everything to Wells. The distinctive physiology and intellect of Wells' Martians made them the prototypical aliens. Their tripod crafts tower over men in body, as the vast intellects of their occupants tower over human intelligence. Somewhat like Sheldon, physically frail but mentally intense, the Martians and their superior machines are instruments of human oppression. Their weapons of heat rays and poison gas are dehumanizing devices of mass murder. All attempts at contact are futile, furthering the idea of the aliens as an unrelenting force of outer space. In fact, since Wells, alien invasion has become such an inexhaustible topic for fantastic film and fiction that we expect them to head over the horizon at any moment. Alternatively, as American anthropologist Loren Eiseley powerfully suggests, there may not be aliens dwelling in space at all. So deep is the conviction that there must be life out there beyond the dark, one thinks that if they are more advanced than ourselves, they may come across space at any moment, perhaps in our generation. Later, contemplating the infinity of time, one wonders if perchance their messages came long ago, hurtling into the swamp muck of the steaming coal forests, the bright projectile clambered over by hissing reptiles, and the delicate instruments running mindlessly down with no report. In the nature of life and in the principles of evolution, we have had our answer. Of men elsewhere and beyond, there will be none forever. I've sometimes used the example of Superman to illustrate the point about the influence of H.G. Wells on the modern idea of alien invasion. The Man of Steel was born as Kal-El on the alien planet of Krypton. His parents, Jor-El and Lara, learn of Krypton's imminent destruction, sounding exactly like the kind of entropic decay Wells envisioned for Mars. So, Jor-El builds a spacecraft to carry Kal-El to Earth. Now, according to Superman number 132, Krypton was 3 million light-years away from our home planet. Cosmically speaking, that's not so far, but it's hardly next-door neighbor either. Over 20 other galaxies sit between Superman's world and our Milky Way. What, we might wonder, inspired Jor-El to send his son earthward? Let alone the exacting logistics of launching a rocket on a light-year's trajectory in this direction, and given the certain billions of planets between Krypton and here, and assuming there are probably thousands of civilizations per galaxy, you get a good idea of the poor thinking behind the plan. Alien invasion. So what of the work of UNUSA, the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs? Howard's comment on their work is, boy, that's one of those jobs that's boring, 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 then, oh, God, where's the memo with what we do now? And yet the expectation of alien invasion has developed little since the War of the Worlds. Wells said nothing about alien culture. Martian culture seems bestial, wasted away by some entropic decay and whittled down to nothing more than a barbarous justification to invade Earth. And the Martians have little interest in the many forms of human culture. Instead, like vampires, they are intent only on human blood. And this pared-down rationale for human oppression inspires readers of The War of the Worlds into loathing the Martians and has greatly influenced how we think about the latent power of alien invasion on Earth, like an unsolicited natural selection from outer space. Wells's Martians are inhabitants of a dying planet, which is fast winding down into desert. But this exceptional case for alien invasion within our solar system has been thoughtlessly adopted many times. Writers of film, fiction, and comic books have mostly aped the same invasion myth, but without truly addressing the exceptional case Wells made for the Martians. Not only that, but in an attempt to eclipse the Master and his Martians, writers attributed ever greater power to aliens, and they gifted to Earth the promise of unimaginable riches, a glittering prize of a planet not only of value to the small desert world of Mars, but for any imaginable civilization in the galaxy and beyond. The impact of real alien contact would depend on factors such as the method of discovery, the nature of the aliens, and their location relative to the planet Earth. With these factors in mind, the Rio scale has been developed to get a better picture of the potential results of contact. One study by astronomer Stephen J. Dick at the U.S. Naval Observatory looked at the cultural impact of alien contact by considering cases of similar significance from the history of science, such as the profound scientific revolutions associated with Copernicus and Darwin. Dick's study suggests that impact would be more likely from radio-based contact than a more dramatic visit from alien craft. And his study also rejects the commonly used analogy of European colonization of the Americas as an accurate model for data-only contact. The actual distance between two contacting civilizations is also a factor. When you think about the cultural impact of alien contact, historical examples help. They show that the greater the physical distance from the contact point, the less the contacted culture sees it as a threat to itself and its civilization. So, in this case, H.G. Wells is right again. Contact occurring within the solar system, and especially on Earth itself, is going to be the most disruptive and negative for humanity. Should there be any aliens in outer space, of course. On a smaller scale, still, people living near the contact epicenter would suffer a greater effect than those living farther away. Studies suggest contact with multiple epicenters would cause a greater shock than one with a single epicenter, which is no doubt why many invasion stories feature multiple epicenters, such as a series of alien motherships sitting above many of Earth's major cities. Luckily, dear reader, scientific protocols have been drawn up detailing the course of action you need to take in the event of alien contact. These include what to do after receiving a message from an alien source, whether or not to send a reply, and thinking about the long-term consequences of the message. As an example, here is what you do on receiving an alien message. Any person or organization detecting a signal should try to verify that it is likely to be of intelligent origin before announcing it. Good luck with that. The discoverer of a signal should, for the purposes of independent verification, communicate with others before making a public announcement, and should also inform their national authorities, and hope that you're not locked up. Once an observation is found to be a credible alien signal, the astronomical community should be informed, along with the Secretary General of the United Nations, if you just happen to have his or her number. Following confirmation of an observation's alien origin, news of the discovery should be made public. The discoverer has the right to make the first public announcement. Whoop! It could be you. The Bat Jar Conjecture and Aliens. Imagining the Unimaginable. In The Bat Jar Conjecture, Season 1, Episode 13, Raj wonders about alien morphology. If anything is certain, it is that life elsewhere in the universe, intelligent or otherwise, will look at least as exotic as some of Earth's own life forms. Neil deGrasse Tyson, The Search for Life in the Universe. NASA Astrobiology Magazine. There be aliens. Raj has got a good point about aliens in the Bat Jar Conjecture episode. As Raj asks, how come fictional aliens are so often like us? In fact, when you come to think about it, most people probably think the idea of alien life is a relatively recent thing. Extraterrestrials were spawned by the movies, maybe, or at least during the early days of science fiction by writers such as Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. But They'd be wrong. The belief in life on other planets such as ours begins with the imaginative atomists of the ancient Greek world. Chief among these atomists was Democritus, a Greek thinker of the 5th century BC.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?